Hey, hey, Jimmy D and the Wolf podcast.
Hello.
This is Jimmy D, and I'm the Wolf, Tim Wolf.
How you doing, man?
I'm can't complain, living the dream in my studio, remixing my EP, which I
Uh,
hope to have done by the end of this week. I hope.
You know, I need to get back on that horse myself, man. In the winter time, I got the bulk of an album recorded in a local studio. Just me and the drummer went in there and just hashed it all out and just kind of got busy with other things. And it's still sitting there, super close to done. It just needs like a few overdubs and it's finished. I need to make that a big priority.
Yeah, you should. Dennis, right? Dennis is the
Yeah.
guy.
Dennis O'Neill, man, what a cat. But I've developed sort of a method with that where I've learned that like when you record something, it's still your baby and it's still fresh and it's still brand new. And you can't really listen to it objectively during the creation process. So what I try to do is just create and then walk away from it and come back to it with fresh ears, 3 months later or something to figure out, is this as good as I thought it was or is it trash?
Yeah, I've heard it described as collaborating with yourself that way.
Much. Yeah.
Because
Always
you
headspace.
you leave it lay for a month or two or a year or two or a decade or two, depending on the case. You come back to it and you're like, what is this? That's my voice, but I don't remember this.
Right.
Well, I mean, that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about an album that you've pretty much completed, but yeah, there'll be things when you listen back that you'll be surprised probably that you didn't remember putting in, or I don't remember
Right.
going that way, or
Right. For better or worse,
yeah,
you know? And I think the hardest thing to do is to have enough discipline to just shelve something.
yeah.
And
Well,
so
I'm
start over.
as I think I've told you, and I don't know if I mentioned it on the podcast. It's no secret. I signed on with ADG Entertainment here in Nashville, which is a artist coaching company, and ADG no AG yeah AGD stands for Another Great Day. I love that. Anyway, and they've got all these processes and tech things set up in Asana. Some of our listeners may be familiar with Asana. It's an organization tool, an app, kind of like Google Docs, I guess, but it's actually for project management. And you can communicate if you enter something in and put a demarks or put someone's name with an asterisk in front of it. They'll get a message that you call them out, not call them out, but you mention them, and um, so it's quite a deep dive. I mean, the Asana program is pretty deep. Anyway, so it's really a proceduralized way for launching an album and all the publicity and everything around it. So I'm really looking forward to it. Anyway, but one of the reason I'm thinking about it or talking about it is one of the things that they ask you to do. They're of the ilk that you need to write 5 times as many songs you're going to put on the album. So I want to have a 12 cut album, which I've kind of already selected the songs. So they're saying that would be 60 songs, which I know that's a common thought process, and I know I'm not Phineas and Billie Eilish, but Billie Eilish's record setting album that Phineas, her brother, produced had 13 cuts on it, and it won the big four at the Grammys: album of the year, song of the year, uh, uh, new artist of the year, and or new artist of the year, and then what's the other one? Record of the year, um, song of the year, record of the year. What are the album of the year? Yeah, it won all four, which hadn't been done since the '80s. And when asked how many songs they wrote for the album, they looked at each other and giggled and said, "There's 13 songs of the album. We wrote 13 songs."
Seems legit to me, man.
But then the next person would say, "Are you think you're Phineas and Billie Eilish?" And Phineas also won for producer of the year. But anyway, so the point being, to get back, circle around, and not make this rabbit trail too long, I I started going through. Okay, I can come up with 60, and they're saying even song ideas are okay. Like if you got a chorus, I said I can come up with 60, and I started going through stuff, and I ran across a couple of things that I'd completely forgotten that I'd done. One was an absolutely completed song that was actually pretty good that I did on piano, and I'm like, man, I played piano pretty well that day because piano is not my main instrument. And so anyway, kind of alluding to what you were saying, you let it lay and you come back to it,
Sure.
and it'll be
Yeah, and sometimes you're disappointed, and sometimes you're pleasantly surprised.
yeah, yeah,
I had a funny thought when you accidentally said call somebody out with the little asterisk thing. Of like, we should start how the rappers have like rap battles. We should start like folk singer battles where different different songwriters start calling each other out in song. It'd be hilarious. The rappers tear each other apart, man. Imagine what Bob Dylan could do to somebody.
Steve Vest says, hey guys, how you doing,
Hey,
Steve?
Steve,
Glad to be on here.
one of my oldest friends, man. We grew up next door to each other.
Nice.
Yeah, little rough and tumble kids over on Lanier Drive.
Well, I can't wait to. I know I've listened to, I think, a couple of songs on your album. How many cuts you got that you recorded?
12?
Oh my gosh! How many of them are ones that I had the pleasure of co-writing? 2 or 3?
Uh, 3, I believe.
What were the 3?
That it was The Test is the Cure, Castle Built the Cards, and we never named. No, the one song I think we were calling it Wait.
Oh, the one about on the cardboard box.
Yeah, the man with
Yeah,
the
it's called Wait. Yeah, we call it
he
Wait.
walks around town. Yeah, and it's kind of spread out, which I like, and that's why I stepped away from it, because I want to go back and hear it and see if it feels anything like an album. Sometimes different songs and I'm so nostalgic, man. I'm still just married to the concept of an album, even though that ship sailed many years ago.
Well, I'm not so sure. I've changed my opinion in the last year because of what Taylor Swift has done. She put out 2 albums, and they are, I feel, albums in the true sense of the word.
Yeah.
Last year, I mean, she got busy, and one of them won Album of the Year at the Grammys.
Well,
Folklore won Album of the Year.
and I love the whole experience of, when I was younger, it was such a huge deal to get. It was tapes for me, it was after 8-tracks and vinyls. And to get the tape, and it was a huge deal if you open it and it had all the lyrics on the insert. I was like,
Absolutely.
oh, wow. That was next level stuff. But taking in the entire experience of what's the album cover look like, and the artists that are credited on the inside. And you didn't just listen to a song. There were no singles. It was just the whole thing. You take the whole thing in.
We've talked about how Columbia Record Company was a lifeline for both of us.
Sure. I think I still owe them like $3 million.
Where you would get your first 10 for a penny or something, and then they would send you
the worst albums in the world. You got to pick the first 10, and then they would send you like trash every month for the next year.
Well, actually, I mean, somehow, and we've discussed this, somehow, I don't know why, this white, wonder-bred white farm boy from South Dakota in the rural farm must have checked the box of soul, because
Good for you, man.
all the stuff I got was Stevie Wonder and the Temptations, the album that had Papa Was a Rolling Stone. I remember I got a compilation for the Jackson 5. And this was music that I'd never heard. You certainly didn't hear it on the radio. Somehow I checked that box, and I absolutely love that music.
It's the greatest music ever, in my opinion.
How that box got checked. Maybe because I was a church-going Christian, and I thought, soul, oh, okay. That's important, my soul. This music will feed my soul.
And it did.
I have no idea if that's what happened. Oh, we got some comments here. I did not put these up here. Uh, I can save time at a bottle better than you, Jeff says. And Steve has another comment. Oh, my volume is low. Can you barely hear you? Okay. Okay, I can turn that up, I think. Is that better?
Yeah,
I
man.
hope that's better. Is that louder, Jimmy?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Man, I've been trying to, like when I do my lives, I've having difficulty dialing it in. I mean, every time there's something wrong with the audio, and when I do my live stream on my music. Last time I listened back to it and it had distortion somehow, and I'm like, what? I listened to it in my headphones.
Well, it's easy for electric. Are you using acoustic or electric?
I'm losing acoustic, but my voice is what was distorting.
Yeah. It's easy to kind of clip out the mic. It's like these iPhones, they're so smart that they'll figure out the volume and kind of compress it that way. And if something kind of pushes that, it'll distort really bad. So it's like if you started a song on your guitar and the acoustic guitar is here, it's like the iPhone might adjust to it. And then if your voice is louder, you get that immediate compression. Like a lot of the guitar videos that we did where I'm like playing electric guitar and it sounds fine. And I stop and I'm talking, it's like, because it hasn't recalibrated yet.
Ah, right. Volume is better. Thanks, Terry. I mean, I can still turn it up even more if it's still too low.
I think it's right.
I don't want you to be able to be louder than me, Jimmy. It's a competition.
Plug it into your new basement amplifier.
Yeah, in the back here, can you see? I wonder if you see there. There's my basement. I got my basement back from my 58 basement back from Nashville Amplifier Repair. Shout out to them. And I got my, I think it's about a 70 Fender Twin. It's a Novaster volume Fender Twin. It's a silver face, but I think they're equivalent to the black face for those who are guitar amp nerds. You know, the black face is what everybody wants because it's supposed to be the best wiring. But what I read up on, they cost a lot of money, so I got a silver face, but as long as it's a non-master volume. So those of you who are guitar players, I'm so excited. They needed, I got them around the same time, and they both needed some work. I took them to Nashville Amplifier, and when I dropped them off, they said, well, we're backed up. We can probably start looking at them maybe in 12 weeks. 3 months. Sat there in their shop for 3 months before they could even look at it. But they're very pleasant, very, very, polite, and did great work. I didn't think it was that out of line for all the work they did. A few $100, but okay, Steve, thank you. All right, so the subject that I picked today, because I'm fascinated with demographics and things like life expectancy and things like that. And do you know that I was talking with my roommate that my grandfather lived to be 99, and he died in the late 70s. I don't remember the exact year. I know I was in college at the time, so maybe 78. I think he died. So he was born probably in the 1870s. So I looked up the life expectancy of someone born in the 1870s. Do you know how long, which expected life expectancy was?
41.
What's that?
41.
Exactly, 41. Women were 41, men were less. And that's amazing. That means that women didn't even get to menopause. And that really didn't change, and there's this in-depth article about this where I got this information. And actually, global life expectancy really didn't change. It was around 35, except for, Bible times. Methuselah lived to be almost 1,000 years old. But, in the modern era, they started recording this in around 1600s. Statistics, mathematics was developed, and they started calculating life expectancy. And it pretty much stayed the same for centuries and centuries. It was around 35, maybe 40, didn't change at all until around 1920 is when it changed. In fact, the Spanish flu was much worse than the pandemic we've just had. The world population was 1/4, and they had 100 million deaths from the Spanish flu, and we've got 4 times the population. We've only had like 3 million worldwide. So it was, and they would die almost immediately. So and it actually decreased the life expectancy by significantly because of that event. But after 1920, when it was around 35, in 2020, now it's more than double that. Worldwide life expectancy is in the 70s. And there were 4 main things that happened to cause that. Would you like to know what they are?
Sure. I mean, while we're here, we might as well.
So first of all, the first one was that something called vaccination, where you variola, where you take a diminished amount of whatever it is that's killing people. Smallpox, were killing people right and left. Just horribly killing people. And there was no difference between if you were an aristocrat or if you were a poor person. In London, everybody had the same life expectancy. There was no difference. Being wealthy did not help you. Until suddenly, in the 1750s in London, the aristocratic life expectancy started going up substantially. And what had happened is they'd figured out how to do this, where you would take a small amount of smallpox, inject it into somebody's arm, and they would recover. They would get sick and they would recover, and then they would be immune to smallpox. And that actually was brought to the U.S. colonies by the slaves that came from Africa, because it was a practice that was well known in other parts of the world, not the Western world, but it was known in China and it was known in Africa. And that's something that slaves knew about when they were brought over. I mean, if I was a slave, I don't know if I would share that to my new overlords.
Right. But
that's how it was brought to North America. But it wasn't very widespread. But the British, aristocrats did it, who wanted to live past 40. As tough as life was back then, who wanted to live past 40?
That's probably right on, dude. Think about it. I mean, by 40, you were probably exhausted. Like, I'm over it. Take me home.
So, that started happening. And then a guy aristocrat and British guy, a guy last name Jenner, realized that cow maids who had cowpox, which was something related, were kind of immune to smallpox. So that's where he came up with what is current vaccination. Because variola, a lot of people die because you're injecting a small amount of the disease, but a lot of people can't make it. So the death rate from getting that shot could kill more people than you'd wanted. So he came up with the idea, but he actually thought of it because he was already familiar with the variola technique of injecting a little bit of smallpox. And he noticed that cow maids who worked with cows and had cowpox were immune to smallpox. And he developed this technique and experimented with it and started injecting cowpox into people's arms and then made them immune to smallpox. And it made a radical increase it just radically changed the death rate. But there were countervailing movements. The second thing was in the U.S., the death rate declined by like 13 years in the early 1900s because everybody's moving to the city, even though now smallpox was being eradicated, but there was another problem, and that was milk. People were drinking milk and it wasn't homogenized. So Louis Pasteur, who was a Frenchman, came up with pasteurized milk, and it was used to prevent people from dying, but it wasn't widespread for 50 years until the guy who owned Macy's started giving it to orphanages and cut their deaths in half and solve that problem. And then the next one was penicillin, invention of penicillin, because we actually we had then we had a lot of vaccinations for polio and a lot of other things, but once you got sick, we had nothing for you. They had, people would sell snake oil, but it never really worked until they developed penicillin. So those were I might have skipped one. We didn't have medical drugs that actually worked until penicillin came on in the 1940s. And that was a secret, like a Manhattan Project. It was developed by the Allied powers as a way to keep soldiers alive when they would get injured. And it was a secret, like a Manhattan Project, with the same kind of fervor and cooperation, but most people don't know about it. And it was developed by the Allies in mass production to be able to vaccinate people.
Wow.
Or not vaccinate, but to eject, to prevent people that were injured. So I don't know. That might be a boring topic. I think we lost half of our audience. So, these are the things that have a quick overview of what has made our mortality rate go from 35, 40 to now 70s, 80s. Although the U.S., we've got a problem that our mortality average life expectancy has declined 3 years running because of drug overdoses and suicides, primarily drug overdoses. We've got a rash of drug overdoses. It's very sad.
Yeah.
So the average, our life expectancy is going down because, when you die young, that really affects the life expectancy, right? So.
And suicides.
Suicide also. So. And the fastest growing segment of the world population is the centenarians, or the people that are 100. And they're saying that, what was the year? There's like a few thousand, and it's going to be 25 million by, I think, 2050. See if I can find that stat.
25 million people, 100 older.
Yeah, see if I can find that. Centenarians are going to be the fastest growing group. I don't remember the exact. It's exploding. People are living to be past 100. So I mean, my grandpa was born in 1870s, lived to be 99, but he was an outlier, extreme outlier. And he had a car accident and broke his hip. He had to have a walker for the last. He was like early 70s when that happened. So the last almost 30 years of his life, he couldn't really, he had to walk with a walker, so he didn't get much exercise. So I feel I've got good genes.
Absolutely. Yeah, he'd live to be 130 if he was alive today.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, I plan to live another 40 years.
I hope you do, man, or more.
Healthy years. I mean, I don't want to be an invalid, I mean, there's a thing about living long, but being, an invalid and having people taking care of you, and nobody wants to live like that.
Right.
But anyway, I think this was a less sexy of a topic than I thought it was going to be.
Well, I mean, how is that affected by race and income, and all that affects it, I'm sure.
Terry asked how old my dad was. My dad was 87 when he died. He had a heart valve issue that was from congenital from when he was born, and but they didn't find it until later in life, and they were wanting to operate on it because I don't think they would have opened him up. They could have gone through. They can do so much by going through veins and stuff, and he refused the operation. He didn't. Once my mom died, he didn't. He was just looking to check out. I mean, so yeah, I would have taken medical intervention, but his desire for life after my mom died was greatly reduced. So it's sad. I mean, how many couples that are together for 50 years and then, one of them dies and the other one just
right behind them.
Right behind them. It's a very romantic story, but it's a sad story in a way, So
Well, what are the effects on, race and income? How does all that factor in?
Well, there's a huge in America. There's a huge separation by race in the U.S. I know it's in this article, but human beings now live 73 years on average globally, more than twice as they did a century ago. 73 is the global average. But in some countries, like Africa, it's not that great. They're not giving any numbers here in this article. Oh, Malawi has a lifespan of 65 years. Malawi, which is, I think, an African country. But 2 decades ago, it was only 44. So developing countries, they have a lot of other problems. Like I know in Africa, they have AIDS epidemic. Steve says he has a history of only making it to 65, 67. We'll probably be checking out in 20 years if I'm lucky. Well, genetics does play a part, I guess. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I don't know.
80 is the magic number in my family.
How old was your dad when
80.
He passed? 80. How about your grandfather? How about his father?
80.
Wow.
Yeah. The women all live forever. The men all drop dead at 80 miraculously. If they smoke, if they don't smoke, if they eat right, if they don't eat right, whatever, it's 80. I've got 37 years left, pretty much. So far, that's kind of the thing. Which is, I mean, that's okay. It's about the average.
Steve says, I imagine the quality and purity of food has and will play a part in longevity. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are small areas where the life expectancy is way, way outperforming the world average. And I know one of them is Okinawa, Japan, the island of Japan. I've read articles on that.
Eating clean, man. They're eating all that sushi and stuff. And
they say another major factor is their social construct. I mean, apparently reading this article, because Okinawans are really not even, they're part of Japan, but their culture is different than Japanese. I mean, they're far, far away. I mean, I don't know. It's a haul from mainland Japan, the 4 main islands of Japan, to Okinawa. And I've never been there. I want to go one day. Of course, we have a base there. But part of their longevity is their social construct. Everything is done socially, based on my understanding, and they interact a lot. And here's another statistic. Maybe I won't make it because I've never been married. Both of my grandfather and my dad were married, and marriage adds to your life expectancy, contrary to what you might think. Haha, just joking.
Yeah, they say that married men live longer, but it turns out it just seems that way.
Hope Katie's not listening.
No, she's not. Well, it's a huge deal. I mean, social life.
And there's another micro group somewhere in Italy, some in the mountains of Italy or something. that have been studied that their life expectancy is way beyond the norm. I mean, just way beyond. I mean, I wish I was prepared to talk about this, but I know there are people in diet but also social behavior. It's amazing. They say that the social, the interactions is really important. Feeling like you have someone you belong with, interacting with people,
Yep.
all that sort of thing. Having relationships in your life contributes. So.
Well, yeah, you hear those stories all the time, man, of whatever age they are. I've heard stories tons of times of somebody that's kind of a tough guy. They say he's like an iron worker or whatever. They say, oh, he's going to retire, and he retires from being an iron worker at 52. And then they say, what happened to Joe? Well, Joe died right after he retired. Because
Yeah.
when people retire, it isn't talked about enough that most of your social life stems from your work. People aren't just meeting each other at grocery stores or whatever.
And I mean, life expectancy 35 to 40. You didn't retire. Well, who's retired at 35? Hey, I just turned 30. I'm going to retire now.
Right.
So the whole concept of retirement, retirement. So get my quote fingers in the camera. Is a recent phenomena. I mean, I'd say probably post World War II, the whole idea of retirement. And so we don't quite know what to do with that. I mean, you lose your sense of purpose. I mean, that's why people, you got AARP people at Walmart doing greeters, they say, hey, let me be useful. Let me do something.
Hey, both my parents are hardcore on that, dude. My mother and father both are like, no retirement. There's no retirement. No, I don't do that. We go until we can't go anymore. Mom's still working. She's 72 and she still works as hard as ever. And my dad worked until he could not. I mean, we roofed a house together the year before he passed, and he just went until the wheels came off, And I hope to do the same. I have every intention of going until it's like, I want to be that guy that my grandkids are like, he still works his ass off. I want them to see that.
Yeah, I think that's healthier. I think that's better for you. You have some meaningful existence. People just want to. I mean, everybody wants to have a place. Everybody wants to have something that they can contribute. I don't care whatever age, doesn't matter.
Sure.
And as we get older, I mean, it's a major thing. In Japan, when I used to work for the Japanese company, I don't know if they've changed it now, but when you reach 60 in the companies, you were forced to retire. You retired.
Wow.
Yeah, you had to. And a lot of my students were men who had been maybe top executives, my English students when I taught English. A lot of them had maybe been top executives and had a lot of responsibility. And then all of a sudden, kaboom, you turn 60. Okay, see you later. Here's your gold watch. And what do we do for themselves? High vitality. And they would sometimes talk about how they were, cut off the knees, so to speak, thinking they had a lot to contribute yet, but they
did. We do it wrong. It should be like the daycares should be the same place where the really, really old people are, because really, really old people know a lot of stuff. It's like teachers. I mean, you should be allowed to start teaching when you're 60 instead of like 24 years old. Because there's all this great data that doesn't necessarily get transferred from the older people that actually know what the hell they're talking about to the younger people. And that divide, because of technology, is just going to get wider and wider and further and further and further.
It's hard for a 5-year-old. I mean, a 5-year-old, when grandma asked their 5-year-old grandkid to, hey, honey, would you help me set up my phone or computers? It's hard to respect your elders when they're asking you how to do stuff.
Yeah.
So it's turn things upside down.
Right.
When
right. When grandma knows 10 gazillion times more than the kid does about life in general.
But not how to use the app, and makes it seem the kid thinks they're stupid. This is so simple because these kids are intuitive. They grow up with it. and these apps are so intuitive. They know exactly right. You've seen it. I got to believe your kids are very intuitive with
Big time.
computers.
I have to ask Memphis, and this is seriously, I'm not exaggerating when I say this. Oftentimes, I can't even get to where I can watch TV because it's like on the Xbox, there's all these different icons, and they'll be on something else. I'm like, Memphis, come in here. I want to watch Netflix or whatever. Help me out. And he'll, beep, 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 it's done. So he probably thinks that I don't know anything at all ever. It just is what it is. He's probably like asking other kids' fathers' advice.
My dad's an idiot. He can't even turn on the TV. So
Can't even watch TV.
yeah, it's
Well, it's the biggest untapped resource we have. The old folks are.
yeah, and whereas you talking about Japan in a generation went from really paying respects and respecting the elderly to becoming westernized, or whatever the term would be. And there was an article in the New York Times that just broke my heart, profiling these apartments, and not in, because everybody leaves in Japan. It's, if you think in the U.S. that kids go to the city, like Madison where you live, maybe kids leaving and going to the city. Multiply that effect smaller towns, like back in South Dakota. I lived in Willow Lake, small town of Willow Lake. But there were a lot of young people that stayed, had jobs. I mean, it was a vibrant community. In fact, the school was actually growing because more people were having kids. So, I mean, there are some counter trends to that. But in Japan, if you want to achieve something, you go to the city. You go to Tokyo or you go to Osaka. Primarily Tokyo. Tokyo is where you go, the big city. And if it's not Tokyo or Osaka or Kobe or Nagoya, main big cities, and these smaller towns are getting hollowed out, and so the elderly are left to stay there, and they're staying in these apartment complexes that everyone has left them, and a lot of them don't even get visits or cards or phone calls or anything from their descendants. And they would make they talk about this one woman who made a deal with the woman across, that they could see each other's windows, because maybe like courtyard or something, and they said, watch my window and make sure, and I'm going to adjust the blinds a different way every day. And if a day or two goes by and I don't adjust the blinds, check in on me, because I might be dead or I might be ill or something. It just breaks your heart, because they find people, from the odor, because nobody checks in on them, nobody pays attention to them, and they just die, and nobody even notices that they're gone. And it's, that's a case in a lot of societies, but for Japan to go from one generation ago, where I remember my boss in Japan, in the Japanese company, he talked about how his house in Japan had 3 levels, and 3 generations lived in that house. I think they put the young generation on the 3rd floor, probably put the first generation on the 1st floor, and the middle generation in the middle floor, I suppose. I don't think, unless they had an elevator, you wouldn't put the seniors on the 3rd floor, but everybody lived in the same building. And they that's how things were done. You took care of your parents, and in one generation, they got even worse than the average. Although people that work in nursing homes in the U.S. say it breaks their heart how there are people that they have that they take care of that nobody comes to visit them. So we have that too. But my sense is it's more of an epidemic, especially based on where they were a generation ago. Is my sense. We're going to have a lot of Japanese writing in saying, you don't know my country.
You don't know me like that. I go see my grandma all the time, fool.
I'd be curious to see how stress has played a part in, Steve says, played a part in life expectancy to now and then as well. I think we have put a lot of stress on ourselves that didn't exist back then. Well, 100%, I think stresses are different. In spite of whatever we would think, violent deaths are drastically lower than they were in any time in history. Dying from war or duels or even accidents. We safety, so we're not, in danger of, heck, 100 years ago, getting pregnant could have been a death sentence. There are a lot of women that died in labor, and you know, so there were a lot of other things that killed us, and that would give us stress. But yeah, they didn't have social media, and they didn't have, getting bullied at school. Well, I
And
mean,
impossible standards. I mean, what was the metric of how do I know I'm successful 100 years ago or 120, 150 years ago? How do I know I'm successful? Well, I'm not dead. I'm not starving to death. I think I'm doing pretty good for myself. I've got a candle for tonight, and I caught a few fish that I'm going to eat, and I already brought a pail of water in, and you know what I'm saying? Now,
absolutely.
how do I know I'm successful? Well, I'm not a billionaire, and I don't have a six pack, and I'm not on TV, and I'm not famous. I'm a failure. So everybody has these impossible,
Yeah.
impossible.
I mean,
metrics.
and Steve, you're 100% right. I mean, we've got stresses that we didn't even have 10 years ago.
Sure.
I mean, we've got social media stresses and addiction to the phone. I mean, I'm guilty of it. And
has somebody hacked my stuff? That's the new one for me. Did somebody hack my bank account?
oh yeah, I've been thinking about it too. I've been thinking about going in there and saying disconnect my savings account from the internet, so and only make it so that it only can be accessed from this branch, from
Right.
me personally. You know, if you, of course, if you believe the movies, somebody walks in and impersonates, like Shawshank Redemption. Shawshank Redemption, one of my favorite movies. The protagonist. I don't remember the names of the protagonists, but you remember, he he had been siphoning the money for the warden, and then he went in and took all that money out because they had. Well, that was his signature actually. You remember the story, Jimmy? Do you know the story?
I remember the movie vaguely.
Yeah, it's got Morgan Freeman in it, and who's the young guy? Tim Robbins, I think was the protagonist, and he had been a CPA, and he got convicted of killing his wife, who was cheating on him, and never was determined if he was guilty or not. But he was in prison, and the warden realized he was really good with numbers, and so he put him in charge of his illegal activities and kept the books, and he devised a way to escape. And then, since he had been depositing the funds and signing all the deposit slips for 20 years, he went into the bank, had a suit, and went in and withdrew all that money. They had never seen the owner of the account, so they gave it to him. So yeah, this is a real good comment, Steve. Addiction to phones will be an interesting topic for sociologists in the next few years, seeing how it affects the social construct. We can reach more people farther away. You ignore those under the same roof. 100%. Very, very, very smart comment, Steve. You go to dinner or you go out and you see people sitting at the table looking at their phone, and they could actually be texting each other sitting next to each other. So... Yeah, and that's something that we've only had for like 10 years, I think.
There's a lot of growing pains to unpack there. That's going to take, Ripple's going to take 30, 40, 50 years for us to see what the long-standing effects of that really.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I hope this topic was interesting. We've done our 40 minutes.
It was to me.
I love this kind of stuff, demographics and birth rates. And
when you get on it, because I always learn a lot.
So thank you guys for hanging with us. Next week's topic. All right, guys. Well, Next week, same time.
Yep. See you, brother.
See ya.
Peace.